Hi, everybody. This is Mama Cheryl, and this is Meet the Fam. I have my darling friend Sarah here with me today, and God has changed her life so much it's hard to even believe. Absolutely hard to believe. I remember the day I met you in the well, and it was during COVID. And tell me a little bit about our first meeting there. It's okay. She's my darling friend, and God has done so much in her life.
Yeah. I was living in my car, and I was traveling here to visit because this church is the only one that I'd found that believed in demons, and I had a lot of demons, and I thought this is a church that could help me. And I, even before I got a car, I would rent a car from Sacramento, drive it here because I thought this church has the answers that I'm looking for. Wow. And I was very unapproachable back then, very grumpy and fearful and depressed. I kind of kept to myself, but I remember having my own car and living in it to try to, I was like trying to save money and stuff. And you were the first person that walked up to me in the lobby, and I didn't have any friends yet. This was 2020, and I'd been visiting on and off for a couple years, and I would just like show up and leave. I wasn't volunteering or plugging in, and you just saw me in the lobby, and you said, I don't know what you said, like, what are you up to? Or what are you doing? Or something that sparked this conversation. And you asked me all these details of my life, and you found out I was living in my car, and you got me a roof over my head that night. Yeah. So.
It broke my heart because
Yeah.
when I asked her, she said, I'm living in my car. And I was like, oh, honey, that's not
right. You said, why live in your car?
We've got bunk beds.
Yeah. You said, we have beds right here.
Yeah,
Come
we
on.
have beds. Let's set you up in a
Yeah.
bunk bed. And then we found out that she had been really kind of locked down and trapped in her own whole childhood. It was not a nice, it was religious abuse, actually, as a young girl.
Yeah.
Really, did you go to school?
I was homeschooled, and my mom taught us like how to read and how to write. And I'm thankful for that because I am like quite a bookworm and I love writing. And then beyond that, I know we studied like U.S. history. It wasn't like a normal homeschool experience. Like we didn't do
Just a little bit. You got a little bit
I
of
got
education.
enough education to pass a high school proficiency exam when I was 16, but
Well,
it
you're
was like
actually
3
very
hours
smart.
of homework, 3 hours of homework every morning. And then the rest of my day was taking care of my siblings.
So basically you were the mother to your siblings, and did that do a lot of emotional damage in your life? What does that feel like?
Yeah, growing up, we were taught kind of like my mom. I thought God was just like my mom, and my mom was always angry, but she would quote the Bible, and she would have us like memorize Bible verses. And I grew up thinking that God was always angry and always looking down on me, and also that God wanted me for works because my mom was having me take care of the kids because she had too much on her plate, really. And so I grew up thinking that this is kind of the purpose why I exist is to help my mom with her workload. And I was just raising the kids, and I didn't get to be a kid myself because I started doing that when I was 8. I remember my sister getting born when I was 8 years old, and I was taking care of her.
Yeah.
And then there were just more babies after that. So from age 8 to age 18, I was taking care of babies.
So from 8 to 18, you're totally the little mama. just a few years older than the siblings, but you're carrying the whole responsibility.
Yeah.
I remember when we first met, you told me, and it really was very crushing to you that you didn't get to go out the house or go and do things. You were just trapped pretty much.
I had a lot of self-pity too that, I've worked through that since then, but I definitely felt really sorry for myself. So I can imagine when you first met me, I probably was giving you the sob story. And
yes, I did.
Like, poor me, but I was trying to process through the pain of,
You were living in a lot of pain and living in your car, trying to work 2 jobs. And it was not healthy. I was a workaholic. Yep, she was workaholic and not spending any of the money, just trying to keep up with all of life. And it was rough few years. So tell me what happened once you hit 16, 17, 18. What was life?
Oh, yeah.
What happened in life at that point? You broke free of your abusive, like, it doesn't sound as abusive as it was, because when she was telling me, like, tell me more about your mom. Basically was angry, religious, and controlling.
We would get screamed at. So basically my mom screamed a lot, and that's what I remember growing up, that if I made a wrong move, and we had things called like family meetings where she would take all of my siblings and me, and sometimes my dad, if my dad was home, and she would just rant about all the problems in the home and really made it feel like her life was miserable and it was our fault, and we needed to clean the house better, we needed to help out more. She had this overwhelming workload, but there was religious abuse, like women are not allowed to leave the house until they get married, so they have to be under their dad's covering, and then they get married, and then they're under their husband's covering. But a woman's never supposed to be single and just on their own.
Or seen outside. I mean, really, it was just pretty shut down.
I think that was her fear of public schools. Like, I just think it just kind of happened that way. But I didn't have friends usually growing up, and then if I had some, they would do something that offended my mom, and I would have to not be allowed to talk to them anymore, and I wouldn't be allowed to say goodbye. Yep. So I had very few friends. It was like very, very isolated. So I was just working my whole life, taking care of the babies, changing diapers, reading them bedtime stories, cooking food for them. But there's all this religious abuse where I was always told, ironically, I was told Jesus died for my sins, which sounds like a loving thing, but it was not presented in a loving way. It was, Jesus died for your sins, so now behave. Why aren't you behaving better? And I was always told like that I'm bad, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough. And I grew up...
Religion, that's all religion.
Yeah, and just believing, like at the end of every day, I would have these panic attacks at night. I would lay in my bed for hours with a fast heart rate, and we had demons in my house. I don't know if I should talk about that or not, but
could you always see the demons?
Most of the time, yeah, they would be visible to my brothers and me, and I would think that they were trying to kill me because they would like go on your chest and you feel like you can't breathe, and sometimes they'd be like in my closet, like moving the clothes around, and there's not a fan in the room, so like it has to be. But they walk around and fly around and do creepy stuff. And I remember thinking that I was going to die, and I would like lay awake for hours thinking, I have to repent of all the sins I did today, because if I miss one, if I forget one, maybe God's going to kill me. And I just, for some reason, thought God was like always waiting to kill me and punish me, because my mom was always just that quick to punish me or yell at me or scream at me. So and we didn't have violent punishments. Like, I was never physically abused, but I was just emotionally, most of it was emotional. And she would say, go to your room and don't come out until you can have a good attitude. And so I was made to think I have to submit to evil. Basically, from a little young age, I learned, do not resist evil. If it feels wrong, it feels unfair, it feels bullying, I can't resist, because if I resist, I get screamed at. And so I learned, don't resist evil. Just go along and keep your mouth shut and go along. Go along with everything. And that was really the damage, because then I grew up not prepared for the real world and not knowing.
So then
I should have known.
You
be
quiet and do what you're told by whoever is over you. And so then...
I was very submissive and obedient to authority.
Okay.
Even if it was
even if it was
wrong.
abuse. Yeah. And
Right.
so then you stepped into a season that you were being groomed by someone who acted like he loved you. No?
No, it was, yeah. So basically, I was trafficked for sex. And so I will back up a little bit. When I was,
Let's just start over here. So let's go into the next phase of life. Your mother was very overbearing and verbally abusive and demeaning and put you down. So you felt like you had no self-worth, right?
exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So what happened next when you got out on your own? What did that look like? From home to where?
Right. Well, I had first met Jesus when I was, I think, 19. I think I got saved when I was 19, but I didn't have a good idea of who he really was. Like, it was hard to go from that he's mean and punishing to that he's kind.
Yep.
So I didn't fully trust that he's really kind, but I met good Christian people in college. Basically, that was when my life started to get some happy
better,
times to my life. I met some Christians in college, and they became like a family to me. And so then something happened in my family where I decided to turn my back on God because I thought God wasn't protecting my siblings. And so even though I had had a little taste that God was good, that God loved me, I'd gotten saved at 19 or 20, but I thought, I'm just going to go and lose my virginity because I'd been taught kind of that that's the worst sin you could ever do, is like having sex outside of marriage. So I thought, I'm just going to hurt God in the worst way that I think will hurt him the most, because I thought that's like the worst thing you could ever do. And I went online and just started hooking up with strangers. And probably the third one that I met was a pimp, and I didn't know that. And he lied to me without me knowing that. I thought that he was just looking for sex, and he had a fiance that lived in another state, and he said, I only see her on the weekends, so that's why I'm on this website, because I need something during the week. And I believed that, and he took me out to restaurants and would buy me things, and it seemed because I was so neglected as a kid, it seemed like he was taking me on these really expensive, I don't remember as a kid going to like sit down restaurants that would be like way outside of our budget. So even though he's just probably using credit cards and it's not like he's actually rich or something, but it felt like, well, somebody's paying like all this attention to me. And I never thought he loved me. I didn't believe that, but it was like comforting to have attention. I was like, oh, he's paying attention to me, asking me all these questions about myself, and not recognizing it for what it was, that it was grooming. He would ask me questions about finances and family, trying to see if I was poor enough that I could go into trafficking, that I would be willing to do it, and seeing if I had family support to see if there was anybody who could talk me out of it. So he was totally trying to feel me out, saying, what's your finances like? How much money do you make? Do you have family in town? Blah, blah, blah. So he just learned everything about me. And this whole time I just thought he wanted that. He really wanted an income stream to support his drug habits. And he was kind of living outside of his means. He bought a brand new truck that was straight off the lot. So he's living outside his means, not really making enough in his day job to support that kind of lifestyle. And he had pimped out girls in Reno. That was his background. He's done a lot of illegal stuff. And I just didn't know. I was naive and I didn't know.
So you got blindsided, not knowing, but thinking, I'm going to rebel against God. And then
I didn't pray.
You ran into was
he was my third hookup, maybe my fourth at the most, but it was really soon, like within a couple weeks of joining this website. And I had already fallen into predator's hands.
Right, we need to do is tell girls, here's the deal. The guys out there on those websites are not out for your best interest at any level. They are actually going to damage you. And tell a little bit about what that season of life was like. What did that feel like to you? What was happening in your heart as all that unfolded?
Yeah. So I was 22. And I remember writing, I was in the passenger seat of his truck, and we were just going through like a 35-mile-per-hour zone. And he looked at me, and he hadn't been looking at me up to that point. He had been looking at the road, and he turned his head and looked at me and said, "What would you think about, or have you ever considered," and he looks right at me and like, "selling your services?" And then he looks back at the road and looks back at me, and I was like, "What does this mean?" And I interpreted it was starting to dawn me. He's a pimp. He's not, he's not a normal person. And I remember thinking, we're only going 35 miles an hour. Should I jump out of a moving vehicle? That was my first
Probably a
thought.
good value. That would have probably been a good
Yeah,
value.
I could have saved myself a lot of pain, but that was my first thought. My second thought was, don't show him I'm afraid. Like, I feel a lot of fear right now. Don't show him I'm afraid, because, I had never met a predator like that before, but I remember, stuff you see on TV. I thought, like, if he's a pimp, he must be violent. He's gonna, he's probably capable of more than I think he is. He looked kind of harmless, but I was like, maybe he's capable of more than I think he's capable of. And I had fear. So I said, well, yes, I've thought of it. And, like years later, like coming to GT, I've learned about thought casters. Like, it's really a spirit. When a thought that's that bizarre comes into your head, it's usually not yourself. Yeah. But I had a thought. There had been a thought in my mind of, you should just be doing this for money. You're doing it anyway, and you're already broke. So the thought actually had entered my mind before he brought it up. And so I truthfully said, yeah, I thought of that before. And I tried not to look scared, not to look nervous. And he just trained me, starting that night, would take me to hotels and say, okay, pretend I'm a client. And I walk in, what's the first thing that you do? And there's all these rules of, how it goes. And like, for example, you have to count the money. You say, oh, can I freshen up in your bathroom? You count the money before you do anything, just in case they slighted you, and so you have to make, so that was one rule. And I would, whenever.
Were you basically doing it out of fear of, like, what would you say? Because he was controlling, he was taking the money, controlling you.
Right. And he would let me keep a third. He would keep 2/3 and I would get 1/3, or something. Or he let me keep 2/3 and he kept one. I can't remember. But it was like, I felt like my first time doing that, I walked out of the house and I remember thinking, that's the easiest money that I've ever made. But it wasn't easy, because then it seemed easy in the moment, but then after the fact, you can't sleep at night. There's all this anxiety and like emotional, mental damage, because it's like, what did I just do? So there was consequences after. Sorry, did I miss your question?
No, not at all.
Or okay.
No,
Yeah.
The tormentors start badgering you more, because you already grew up with demons in your home that you could see, and now you're opening the garage door wide
Which
open.
I didn't know.
But you didn't know that.
Yeah.
But it's really what happened when you met this guy, which you thought you were just hooking up with somebody.
Right.
That's why the Bible makes all these rules and is like, whatever you do, be careful. Don't have sex outside marriage. All these things are
it's a rule out of love. It was never how I heard it, of like, you're so bad if you do this. And I really thought it was.
But you'd already been told you were bad. You're bad. You're bad.
Right.
You're
I
bad.
just believed I was a bad person.
And you walked into that arena where that guy actually took complete advantage of you for that whole season of life.
Yeah.
And what were your thoughts about how to get out of this? How did you think through, how can I get out of this? How can I get out of this trap and the control?
I actually left him once before it was over, because I think I worked for him maybe 7 months, maybe 9 months at the most. But there was a gap of a couple months, because I was thinking, like, I don't want to live like this. Like, I became suicidal. And prior to meeting him, I had already had one suicide attempt. So I was already like depressed enough to want to kill myself, already thought I was such a bad person. But then doing what I was doing made me more suicidal. And there was a time when I quit. I just said, I'm not going to do this anymore. And then like 2 weeks later, was back in contact with him again. I don't remember if I changed my phone number, but I was back to talking to him again. And I had.
It's really like they get a hook in you, though. I mean, it's like some kind of it's a soul tie.
Yeah. And I hadn't heard that word soul tie, but I had heard that if you sleep with someone, you become emotionally attached. So I'd heard the concept of a soul tie without hearing that word. And I thought, well, if I sleep with someone different every night, I can't get this attachment, because then it's always, but then what happens is you're bonding to sex itself instead of to a human. And that's how you get a sex addiction.
Which is what happened.
It happened to me. And I was addicted for 12 years.
Which is what happened. That man that was using you actually was a sex addict, and he used
Yeah.
you and put
And
you
most
out
of the
there.
clients were too.
And of course they were.
Right.
Of course they were.
Yeah.
That's exactly true. And so then you're trying to break free of the whole thing. And what happened?
Without God though, because I hated God, so I couldn't get free. So that when I left the first time, I went back because I was so hard-hearted. First of all, because I had that negative view of God growing up, but then because I got this little taste that God was good, and then something happened that I didn't think God should have handled that situation the way he did. I thought God should have intervened. And so I literally told God, I don't want you in my life. I want nothing to do with you.